I stared at the text message from my stepmom for what felt like forever. The kids need you home by 3:15. Don't be late again. It was Saturday. I was 17 years old, sitting in a college recruiter's office, about to discuss my soccer scholarship. The recruiter kept talking, but I couldn't hear her anymore. My phone buzzed again. Now, Riley, I'm not kidding. I looked down at my hands and realized they were shaking. 372 days. That's how long it had been since I'd had a single day to myself. Not one Saturday. Not one Friday night. Not one afternoon after school without 4 kids screaming my name. This woman wasn't my mother. These weren't my siblings. But somehow, I'd become their unpaid full-time nanny, and my own father told everyone I was just being dramatic. How did I let this happen? And how did I discover that what she was doing to me was actually a federal crime? If this story already touches your heart, please subscribe and stay with me to hear what happened next. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. You might feel less alone in your own struggles. My name is Riley Morgan, and I'm 19 years old now. But when I was 16, my life changed in ways I never saw coming. I need to take you back to before everything fell apart so you can understand what I lost. I was a pretty normal teenager. I went to Lincoln High School in a small town in Oregon. I had good grades, not perfect, but solid B's and A's. I had a best friend named Chloe who'd been my ride or die since middle school. I had a part-time job at a local cafe called The Grind, where I worked weekends and made pretty decent tips. But most importantly, I had soccer. I lived and breathed soccer. I'd been playing since I was 7 years old, and by 16, I was the captain of our varsity team. College scouts were starting to come to our games. My coach told me I had a real shot at a scholarship, maybe even a Division I school. That was my dream. My mom had always wanted me to go to college, to have opportunities she never had. She passed away when I was 12, and I missed her every single day. She used to come to all my games, rain or shine. After she died, it was just me and my dad, and honestly, we did okay. He worked a lot as an insurance manager, but we had our routines. He'd ask about school, I'd tell him about soccer practice, and we'd order pizza on Fridays. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Then about 6 months after I turned 16, my dad started dating someone. Her name was Vanessa. She was 38, blonde, always dressed like she was about to go to a country club, even though we definitely weren't country club people. She had 4 kids from 2 previous marriages: Mason, who was 9, Braden, who was 7, Addison, who was 5, and little Harper, who was 3. When I first met them, I tried to be nice. I knew my dad deserved to be happy again. I remembered how sad he'd been after Mom died. So when he told me he was getting serious with Vanessa, I tried to be supportive. I really did. They got married 4 months later. It was fast. Looking back now, I see all the red flags I missed. But at 16, what did I know? I just wanted my dad to stop looking so lonely. Vanessa and her 4 kids moved into our house. Our 3-bedroom house. Suddenly, I was sharing a bathroom with 4 small children. My quiet home became chaos. There were toys everywhere, constant noise, and Vanessa had very specific ideas about how things should be run. She told my dad she was going to quit her job as a receptionist to focus on blending the family. That should have been my first clue. It started small. 2 weeks after the wedding, Vanessa asked me if I could watch the kids for just an hour while she ran errands. I said sure. That hour turned into 4. When she finally came home, I'd missed soccer practice. When I mentioned it, she laughed and said, "Oh, honey, practice isn't that important. Family comes first." My dad overheard and nodded in agreement. I felt this weird knot in my stomach, but I told myself it was a one-time thing. It wasn't. That's when everything changed. That's when my whole world fell apart, and I didn't even realize it was happening until I was drowning. 3 weeks after the wedding, Vanessa sat me down at the kitchen table. My dad was at work. The kids were watching cartoons in the living room, and the volume was way too loud. She smiled at me, that smile that never quite reached her eyes, and she said, "Riley, we need to talk about your responsibilities in this family." I remember feeling confused. Responsibilities? I already did my own laundry, kept my room clean, and helped with dishes. I thought that's what she meant. But then she pulled out a piece of paper. It was a schedule. A detailed, color-coded schedule. She'd written my name at the top. Monday through Sunday, 3:15 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. on school days. 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekends. Every single time slot had the same words. Riley, childcare. I stared at that paper like it was written in a foreign language. I looked up at her and said, "What is this?" She tilted her head like I was being slow to understand something obvious. "This is your schedule for watching your siblings," she said. "I've been doing everything by myself since we moved in, and it's exhausting. You're part of this family now, and families help each other." I felt my heart start to pound. "But I have soccer practice every day after school until 5:30, I said. "And I work at the cafe on weekends. I have homework," and she cut me off. "You're going to need to quit those things," she said simply, like she was telling me to pass the salt. "Soccer is a hobby. Your job is pocket change. Your real responsibility is here, with your family. These are your siblings now, and they need you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "I'm not quitting soccer," I said. "I have scouts coming to games. I could get a scholarship. And I need my job. I'm saving for Riley." Her voice got hard. The fake sweetness disappeared. "You're 16 years old. You don't get to make these decisions. Your father and I have already discussed this. You're staying home after school to help with the children." End of discussion. I felt like I'd been punched. "My dad agreed to this?" I asked. She smiled again. "Of course he did. He knows how important family is. You can talk to him when he gets home if you want, but he'll tell you the same thing. We're a family now, and you need to step up." I spent the rest of that afternoon in a daze. The kids kept asking me for snacks, asking me to play, asking me to break up fights. Vanessa disappeared into her bedroom and didn't come out. When my dad finally got home at 6:30, I practically ran to him. I pulled him aside and asked him if he really agreed that I had to quit soccer and my job. He wouldn't look me in the eye. He sighed and rubbed his face, and he said, "Riley, Vanessa is overwhelmed. She's adjusting to a new house, trying to manage 4 kids. You're old enough to help out. It's just for a little while, until she gets her feet under her. But Dad, my scholarship, there will be other opportunities," he said. His voice was tired, flat. "Vanessa needs help right now. You're being dramatic. It's just babysitting, dramatic." That word would haunt me for the next 3 years. I tried to fight it. I really did. The next day, I went to soccer practice anyway. I told Vanessa I wasn't quitting. Coach had already put me in the starting lineup for our next game. I'd been training all summer. When I got home at 6 p.m., Vanessa was waiting at the door. Her face was red and she was furious. The kids were crying in the background. She told me Harper had fallen off the couch and scraped her knee because no one was watching her. She said it was my fault. She said I was selfish and irresponsible. When my dad came home, she told him I'd abandoned the children. She showed him Harper's tiny scraped knee like it was a life-threatening injury. She cried. Actual tears. She said she couldn't trust me, that she was trying so hard to make this family work, and I was sabotaging everything. My dad looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Disappointment. He told me I was grounded for a week. He said if I couldn't prioritize my family, I couldn't be trusted with freedom. I felt like I was losing my mind. I tried to explain that Harper had probably just fallen while playing, that kids fall all the time, but he wouldn't listen. He believed her. He took her side. I was grounded. And the next day, Vanessa informed me that since I was grounded anyway, I could start my new schedule immediately. That was the first day I watched those 4 kids from 3:15 p.m. until 8:30 p.m. Harper cried for her mom the entire time. Addison spilled juice all over the carpet. Braden and Mason fought over video games. I made them dinner, chicken nuggets and mac and cheese. I helped Harper use the bathroom. I broke up 3 fights. I cleaned up toys. By the time 8:30 came around, I was exhausted. Vanessa came downstairs, smiled, and said, See? That wasn't so hard. Same time tomorrow. I missed my soccer game that week. I was grounded, so I wasn't allowed to go. My coach called my dad to ask if I was okay. My dad told her I was dealing with family obligations. When I went back to school the following Monday, my best friend Chloe asked me where I'd been. I tried to explain, but even as I said the words out loud, I felt crazy. My stepmom is making me babysit every day. It sounded so simple. Chloe said, "Can't you just say no?" I wish I could have. But by then, Vanessa had my dad completely convinced that I was a difficult, rebellious teenager who needed structure and discipline. Every time I pushed back, every time I said I had homework or I was tired, she'd twist it. She'd tell my dad I was being disrespectful. She'd cry and say I hated her kids. She'd find some tiny thing wrong, a dish I didn't wash, homework left on the table, and frame it like I was failing the family. My dad always took her side. Always. 2 months in, I had to quit my job. Vanessa needed me on weekends now, too. She said the kids were too much for her to handle alone. When I told my manager at the grind that I had to quit, she looked so sad for me. She asked if everything was okay at home. I lied and said yes. I was so ashamed. I'd loved that job. I'd been saving money for college, for a car, for my future. All of that was gone. 3 months in, I had to officially quit the soccer team. My coach tried to talk to my dad. She called him and explained that I had real potential, that scouts had been asking about me, that I was throwing away opportunities. My dad told her that family came first, and I needed to learn responsibility. When I found out he'd said that, I cried for hours in my room. Soccer was the one thing I had that was mine. It was my connection to my mom. It was my future. And it was gone. Vanessa didn't work at all. While I was at school from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., she was home with the kids. But the second I walked through the door, she'd hand them off to me like I was clocking in for a shift. She'd go to her room, or she'd go out with friends, or she'd sit in the living room on her phone while I did everything. Homework, dinner, baths, bedtime routines, all of it. On weekends, she'd sleep until 10 or 11 in the morning, and I'd be up with the kids at 7. I'd make them breakfast. I'd play with them. I'd take them to the park. She'd emerge hours later, refreshed, and she'd say things like, "Thanks for giving me a break." I really needed that. A break. From what? I wanted to scream, but I never did. I just nodded. I was so tired all the time. My grades started slipping. I couldn't focus on homework because I was managing 4 kids every evening. Teachers started asking if I was okay. I lied to them too. I said I was fine, just adjusting to a new family dynamic. One teacher, Mrs. Chen, the school guidance counselor, pulled me aside one day and asked me if I felt safe at home. I didn't know how to answer that. I wasn't being hit. I wasn't being starved. I was just being used. But I didn't have the words for it then. So I told her I was fine. Chloe saw what was happening. She watched me disappear. I stopped hanging out after school. I stopped answering texts for hours because I didn't have time. I stopped going to movies or parties or football games. My whole life became those 4 kids. Chloe would ask me to come over, and I'd have to say no. She'd invite me to her birthday party, and I'd have to say no. Eventually, she stopped asking. Not because she didn't care, but because she knew the answer would always be no. I could see the worry in her eyes every time she looked at me at school. By the time I was 17, I'd been doing this for almost a year. 365 days of waking up, going to school, coming home, and being a parent to 4 children who weren't mine. I had no social life, no hobbies, no future plans because I couldn't make any. Vanessa controlled every hour of my day, and my dad? He was oblivious. Or maybe he just didn't want to see it. Vanessa made sure to be sweet to him. She'd greet him at the door when he came home from work. She'd have dinner ready, dinner that I had cooked. She'd compliment him and laugh at his jokes. And if I ever tried to bring up how unfair this was, how exhausted I was, she'd interrupt and reframe it. "Riley's just tired from school," she'd say, rubbing his shoulders. "Teenagers are so moody. Don't worry, honey. We're managing fine." And he'd nod, relieved that he didn't have to deal with conflict. I felt invisible. Worse than invisible, I felt like I'd been erased. Then, one afternoon in late October, something shifted. I was sitting at the kitchen table trying to finish an essay for English class. It was due the next day, and I hadn't even started it because I'd been watching the kids all week. Harper was tugging on my sleeve, asking for a snack. Mason and Braden were fighting over the remote. Addison had just spilled an entire container of beads all over the floor. I remember just staring at those tiny beads rolling everywhere, and I felt something inside me crack. I looked at Harper, this 3-year-old child who kept saying, "Riley, I'm hungry. Riley, I'm hungry," and I realized something that made my blood run cold. She didn't call me her sister. She called me by my name, the way she'd call a babysitter. Because that's what I was. I wasn't her sister. I was her unpaid childcare provider. That night, after I finally got the kids to bed at 8:30, I sat on the floor of my room and I Googled something I'd never thought to Google before. Can parents force teenagers to babysit? I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe just validation that what I was feeling was real. But what I found changed everything. I found article after article about child labor laws. I found forums where people discussed family exploitation. I found legal definitions of forced labor. And then I found something that made my heart stop. A PDF document from the Department of Labor. It outlined laws about child labor, about compensation, about working conditions. And buried in there was a section about domestic work and family exploitation. It said that while parents can assign age-appropriate chores, they cannot force minors to perform excessive labor that interferes with their education, health, or development. It said that using a child as unpaid full-time childcare could qualify as exploitation, or even forced labor in extreme cases. I read that paragraph 5 times. My hands were shaking. Could this apply to me? I was watching 4 kids for 6 to 7 hours a day on school days, and 12 to 14 hours on weekends. I'd been forced to quit activities and my job. My grades were suffering. I had no social life. I never got paid, not once. Not even an allowance. Vanessa got to live her entire life for free while I gave up mine. I started taking screenshots of everything. Every text message from Vanessa telling me to come home. Every time she detailed the schedule. I started writing down dates and times. October 23rd. Watched kids from 3:15 p.m. to 9 p.m. Made dinner, helped with homework, gave Harper a bath. Vanessa went to dinner with friends. October 24th. Watched kids from 7 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. Dad and Vanessa went to a movie. I wasn't asked. I was told. I started saving everything. Chloe noticed I was acting different at school. I seemed focused, purposeful. During lunch one day, I finally told her everything. I pulled up the articles I'd found and showed her. I told her I thought what Vanessa was doing might actually be illegal. Chloe's eyes got huge. She said, "Riley, you need to tell someone. Like an adult. Someone who can actually do something." That's when I thought of Mrs. Chen, the guidance counselor. The one who'd asked if I felt safe. I made an appointment to see her. I brought my phone with all my screenshots and my notes. I sat in her small office and I just started talking. I told her everything. The schedule. The forced quitting. The isolation. The exhaustion. How my dad wouldn't listen. How I felt trapped. Mrs. Chen listened to everything, and when I finished, she had tears in her eyes. She said, "Riley, what you're describing is not normal family responsibility. This is exploitation. You're being used as unpaid labor, and that's not okay." She made some phone calls. She connected me with a lawyer who specialized in family law and labor rights. His name was David Brennan. He agreed to meet with me for a free consultation. If this story is breaking your heart like it broke mine, please hit that like button and tell me in the comments if you've ever felt completely misunderstood or betrayed. Meeting attorney Brennan changed everything. I went to his office on a Tuesday after school. Vanessa thought I was at a tutoring session. I'd lied to her for the first time ever, and I didn't feel bad about it. I sat across from this professional man in his sharp gray suit, and I told him my story all over again. I showed him my documentation. I showed him the texts. I showed him my log of hours. He listened carefully, taking notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Riley, I'm going to be honest with you. What's happening to you is a gray area legally because you're living with a parent and step-parent. However, the extent and duration of the unpaid labor you're being forced to perform, combined with the fact that it's interfering with your education and opportunities, could potentially fall under exploitation statutes. More importantly, if we can prove that you're being coerced and that you've suffered measurable damages like losing scholarship, opportunities, or income, we may have grounds for a civil case." I felt hope for the first time in over a year. He continued, "I'm also concerned about the emotional and psychological impact this is having on you. That could factor in. But here's the hard part. You're still a minor and your father has legal guardianship. To move forward with anything, we'd need to either get your father on board or we'd need to go through the courts." My heart sank. "My dad will never believe me," I said. "He believes everything she says." Mr. Brennan nodded slowly. "Then we'll need irrefutable evidence. Document everything. Every hour, every task, every missed opportunity. If you have any communications where she explicitly states you're required to do this work, save those. If you have witnesses, friends, teachers, coaches, who can testify about how your life changed after this started, that helps. Build your case, Riley. And when we have enough, we'll present it in a way your father can't ignore." I left his office feeling terrified and determined at the same time. For the next 6 months, I documented everything. I kept my log. I saved every single text message and every email. I reached out to my old soccer coach and asked her to write a statement about how my potential was affected by having to quit. I reached out to my old manager at the grind and asked her to confirm my employment dates and the reason I gave for quitting. I asked Chloe to write down what she'd witnessed, how I'd changed, how isolated I'd become. But while I was building my case, things at home got worse. Because I was spending time meeting with lawyers and gathering evidence, I was sometimes late getting home. Vanessa noticed. She started accusing me of being irresponsible. She started adding more tasks to my list. Now I had to do the kids' laundry too. Now I had to pack their lunches every morning. She was tightening the noose, and I think part of her sensed I was pulling away. One Saturday in March, I was supposed to watch the kids from 7 a.m. until evening. Vanessa and my dad were going to a wedding. But I'd made a mistake in my documentation log, and I needed to meet with Mr. Brennan to go over some details that afternoon. I asked Vanessa if she could find someone else to watch the kids for just a few hours. I lied and said I had a mandatory school project meeting. She lost it. She screamed at me that I was selfish, that I was ruining her life, that she couldn't rely on me for anything. My dad heard the commotion and came downstairs. Vanessa turned on the tears immediately. She told him I was refusing to watch the kids, that I was putting my social life above family, that she didn't know what to do with me anymore. My dad looked at me with such frustration and said, "Riley, we've been more than patient with you. You're going to watch your siblings." "We're not discussing this anymore. They're not my siblings," I shouted. I couldn't hold it in anymore. "They're her kids. I didn't sign up for this. I'm not their parent, and I shouldn't have to give up my entire life because she doesn't want to take care of her own children." The room went silent. My dad's face turned red. "Go to your room," he said, his voice ice cold. "We'll discuss your attitude when we get home." I went to my room, but I didn't stay there. As soon as they left for the wedding, as soon as Vanessa had called a last-minute babysitter for the kids, I grabbed my bag and I went to Chloe's house. I broke down. I cried harder than I'd cried since my mom died. Chloe held me and told me it was going to be okay, but I wasn't sure I believed her. When I came home that night, my dad was waiting up for me. He grounded me for 2 weeks. He said I was being disrespectful and ungrateful. He said Vanessa had bent over backwards to try to blend this family, and I was making everything difficult. I tried to tell him about the hours I was working, about the opportunities I'd lost. He said, "You're being dramatic. Lots of kids help out with their siblings. You're not special, Riley. Dramatic. There was that word again. But I kept documenting. I kept gathering evidence. And by the time I turned 18 in June, I had 18 months of detailed logs. Hundreds of text messages. Witness statements, everything. Mr. Brennan reviewed it all and told me we had a strong case. He said that now that I was 18, I was legally an adult, and I could take action on my own behalf. But there was a problem. If I took legal action against Vanessa and my dad, I'd need somewhere else to live. I couldn't stay in that house during a legal battle. That's when my Grandma Joan stepped in. She was my mom's mother, and she'd been worried about me for months. I'd been calling her sometimes late at night, crying, telling her bits and pieces of what was happening. She lived 2 hours away, but she told me her door was always open. If I needed to leave, I could come stay with her. In August, right before my senior year of high school was supposed to start, I made a decision. I contacted Mr. Brennan and told him I was ready. I packed a bag with my essential belongings. I wrote my dad a letter explaining everything, explaining that what Vanessa had been doing to me was illegal, that I had documentation, and that I was pursuing legal action. I told him I loved him, but I couldn't live like this anymore. I left the letter on the kitchen table and I left. Chloe's mom drove me to my grandma's house. I was terrified. I was 18 years old and I was leaving my childhood home, but I felt like I had no other choice. My dad called me 30 times that first day. Vanessa sent me texts calling me selfish, ungrateful, a liar. She said I was making everything up. She said I'd regret this. My dad's voicemails ranged from angry to confused to pleading. He said I was tearing the family apart. He said I needed to come home and apologize, but I didn't go back. Instead, Mr. Brennan sent a formal letter to both my dad and Vanessa. It outlined the allegations that Vanessa had coerced me into providing approximately 50 hours per week of unpaid childcare for 3 years, that this labor had directly resulted in measurable damages, including the loss of a potential soccer scholarship valued at an estimated $80,000, loss of income from my job totaling approximately $6,000, and significant emotional distress. The letter stated that we were pursuing a civil suit for compensation and damages. My dad called me after he received the letter. I'll never forget that conversation. His voice was different, quieter. He said, "Riley, is this real? Did you really document all of this?" "Yes," I said. "I tried to tell you, Dad. For 3 years, I tried to tell you. You called me dramatic. You never listened. There was a long silence. Then he said, 'I need to see this documentation.' Mr. Brennan arranged a meeting. My dad, Vanessa, their lawyer, Mr. Brennan, and me. We met in a conference room at Mr. Brennan's office. It was the most intimidating thing I'd ever done. I sat across from my father and the woman who'd stolen my teenage years, and I presented everything. The logs, the screenshots, the witness statements from Coach, from my manager, from Chloe, from teachers who'd noticed my decline. Mr. Brennan had calculated the hours. Over 3 years, I'd provided approximately 4,800 hours of unpaid childcare. At minimum wage, that was over $34,000 in unpaid labor. Add in the lost scholarship and lost income, and the damages totaled over $120,000. Vanessa sat there with her arms crossed, her face red, insisting I was exaggerating, that I was a willing participant, that I was being vindictive. But my dad looked at the evidence, and I watched something break in him. He saw the text messages in black and white. He saw the dates I'd had to miss soccer games. He saw my coach's statement about the scouts who'd come asking about me, only to be told I'd quit. He saw everything he'd refused to see for 3 years. "This can't be right," he kept saying. "This can't..." But it was right. It was all right there. Vanessa's lawyer tried to argue that family members have no legal obligation to compensate each other for household help, that this was a gray area, that I was technically part of the household. But Mr. Brennan countered with case law. He cited precedents where courts had ruled in favor of exploited family members in extreme circumstances. He brought up labor laws about minors. He pointed out that I'd been coerced through emotional manipulation and threats, which elevated this beyond helping out. The meeting ended with Vanessa storming out, but my dad stayed. He asked if he could talk to me alone. Mr. Brennan and I exchanged a look, and I nodded. My dad and I sat in that conference room, just the two of us, for the first time in what felt like forever. "Why didn't you make me see this?" he asked, his voice cracked. "I tried, Dad," I said. Tears were streaming down my face. "I tried so many times. You never believed me. You always took her side, I thought." He put his head in his hands. "I thought you were just being a moody teenager. I thought you were adjusting. Vanessa told me you were being difficult, and I believed her. I didn't want to see that she was—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "She was using me," I said quietly. "She was using me so she could live her life while I gave up mine. And you let her." He looked at me, and I saw guilt and regret and horror all at once. "I'm so sorry, Riley. I'm so sorry." But sorry wasn't enough. Not yet. Over the next few months, the legal process moved forward. Vanessa refused to settle. She genuinely believed she'd done nothing wrong. She kept insisting that family members help each other, that I was being vindictive, that I was spoiled. Her lawyer was trying to get the case dismissed, but Mr. Brennan was relentless. He submitted all our evidence. He deposed witnesses. He built an airtight case, and then something happened that I didn't expect. My dad filed for divorce from Vanessa. He told me over the phone one October evening, almost a year after I'd left. He said, "I can't be married to someone who would do this to my daughter." I don't know how I didn't see it. I don't know how I let it happen, but I'm seeing it now and I can't unsee it. The divorce proceedings revealed even more. My dad's lawyer discovered that Vanessa had been using my dad's credit cards to fund her lifestyle. Expensive clothes, spa days, dinners out, all while claiming she couldn't afford childcare. She'd been lying to him about a lot of things. She'd told him I'd voluntarily quit soccer and my job because I'd lost interest. She'd told him I was struggling in school because I was lazy. She'd manipulated him for years, and he'd believed every word. In December, the civil case went to mediation. Vanessa's lawyer finally convinced her that if this went to trial, she'd likely lose, and it would be public record. The mediator looked at all the evidence and strongly encouraged a settlement. After 2 days of negotiation, Vanessa agreed to a settlement of $95,000. It wasn't the full $120,000 we'd asked for, but Mr. Brennan explained that settlements are about compromise. She'd pay it over time and it would be legally binding. But more than the money, I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted her to admit what she'd done. The settlement included a written statement, signed by Vanessa, acknowledging that she had required me to provide extensive childcare without compensation, and that this had negatively impacted my educational and personal opportunities. It wasn't an apology, but it was the truth in writing. When the settlement was finalized, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Validation. The system had believed me. The evidence had spoken for itself. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't exaggerating. I'd been exploited, and now there were legal consequences. My dad and I slowly started rebuilding our relationship. It was hard. I was angry at him for a long time. But he was genuinely remorseful. He started going to therapy to understand how he'd been manipulated and how he'd failed me. He told me he'd never forgive himself for not protecting me. He respected my boundaries when I told him I needed space. And gradually, over months and then years, we found a way back to each other. It would never be the same as before Vanessa, but we were trying. Vanessa moved back to California with her kids after the divorce was finalized. I never saw her again. I heard through my dad that she'd moved in with her mother and was working part-time at a retail store. The settlement payments came through like clockwork, managed by the court. Every month, a portion of that $95,000 went into an account in my name. I lived with Grandma Joan for my senior year. She helped me re-enroll in school in her district. I didn't play soccer again. Too much time had passed, and the scholarships were long gone. But I focused on my grades. I brought my GPA back up. I worked part-time at a bookstore that Grandma Joan helped me get hired at. I started therapy to process everything I'd been through. And I started to figure out who Riley was outside of being someone's unpaid nanny. I applied to colleges with Grandma Joan's help. I wrote my personal essay about resilience and standing up for yourself, even when it's terrifying. I got accepted to a state university with a partial academic scholarship. It wasn't the soccer scholarship I'd dreamed of, but it was mine. I used part of the settlement money to pay for my first year. The rest, Mr. Brennan helped me put into a trust for future expenses. Now I'm 19 and I'm a college freshman. I'm studying social work because I want to help other kids who feel trapped the way I did. I want to be the person who sees them, who believes them, who helps them find their voice. I'm still in therapy, working through the anger and the lost time. Some days are harder than others. I see kids my age who had normal teenage years, who went to prom, who played sports all 4 years, who had carefree summers, and I grieve for what I lost. But I also know that I'm stronger than I ever thought possible. My relationship with my dad is complicated but improving. He's dating again, but he's cautious now. He asks me how I feel about things. He listens when I talk. He's trying to earn back my trust, and I'm trying to let him. We have dinner once a month, and we're honest with each other in ways we never were before. He tells me he's proud of me for standing up for myself, even though it meant standing up against him. That means something. Chloe is still my best friend. She's at a different college, but we text every day. She was with me through the darkest time of my life, and I'll never forget that. She reminds me that I didn't imagine any of it, that it was real and it was wrong, and that I did the right thing. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more stories of strength and vindication. Have you ever experienced a family betrayal or had to fight to be believed? Share your thoughts in the comments. Looking back now, I realize that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you have to protect yourself from. I learned that being called dramatic is often a weapon used to silence you when you're telling an uncomfortable truth. I learned that documentation is power, that knowledge is power, and that standing up for yourself, even when you're terrified, even when you're alone, is the most important thing you can do. I learned that not all family is blood, and not all blood is family. My grandma saved me. My best friend saved me. A guidance counselor and a lawyer who believed me saved me. And ultimately, I saved myself. I lost 3 years of my teenage life. I lost opportunities that I'll never get back. But I gained something too. I gained the knowledge that I'm not powerless. I gained the knowledge that even when systems are stacked against you, even when the adults in your life fail you, you can still fight for yourself. You can still win. If you're going through something similar, if you feel trapped or used or invisible, please know this. You're not dramatic. You're not exaggerating. Your feelings are valid. Document everything. Find adults you trust. Look for resources. School counselors, teachers, hotlines, legal aid organizations. You deserve to have your own life. You deserve to have your own dreams. You deserve to be more than someone else's unpaid labor. I'm 19 years old. I'm a survivor of family exploitation. And I'm just getting started building the life I was always meant to have. Have you ever had to choose between your family and your own future? The stories shared on this channel are entirely fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. We believe in supporting young people and treating all family members with love and respect. These stories are meant to inspire reflection on family relationships and the importance of compassion and truth. Any resemblance to real people, events, or families is purely coincidental and unintentional. These narratives carry no specific cultural, political, or religious implications.